Hi everyone, welcome to today's BIMco Bites on Assemblies. Today we'll be going through assembly use cases, creating and editing assemblies, scheduling and tagging, and assembly views and sheets. Assemblies are a long unrecognized and underutilized tool in Revit, and this session will go through how to best use them. So what is an assembly? An assembly is essentially combined and isolated portions of a project model, which can have their own views associated with them. They can be tagged and they can be scheduled. Okay, so what sort of use cases do we have for assemblies? Assemblies are used for documenting one-off or typical, we'll call them prefabricated or logically related construction elements. It's really important, though, to note assemblies are not groups. And when they are copied, they do not update together. If a copied assembly is edited, it becomes its own unique assembly. Okay. So let's have a look at one of these assemblies that we've pre-prepared in this project, and then we'll go ahead and create our own. So let's have a look at this box window. So this assembly from this model here consists of some elements within this space here. So this assembly, you can see it over here on the right, box window. It's an assembly. If I edit it, it's comprised of many different elements. So we've got a window in here. We've got some plywood walls. We've got a floor. We've got beams, framing, structural framing. We've got some columns. We've got some PowerPoints. We've got some cushions, all in this one assembly. So it sort of seems to be like a group. I'll just close that. Now, these assemblies can have their own views associated with them. So when you select it, you can create your own views and they'll exist in the project browser under assemblies here. So for this box window, we've got a 3D, we've got the frame blown up in 3D, we've got plans, sections, and a detail as well. They are their own views surrounding this element, and as such, they sort of exist down in this space. So that's a good advantage of assemblies, and we'll go through how to create those in a moment. Some advantages of assemblies, they're more robust when dealing with hosted geometry. So compared to, say, groups, you won't have the issues, but it's not a group, as we mentioned. It does include auto-generated isolated documentation views. So if we go back to this view here, these are all those views placed onto a sheet. Multiple elements can be identified using a tag. So this can be tagged as a system, essentially. So you can tag this assembly. It can contain system families as well, which families, loadable families, cannot, as we identified when we were looking at this particular assembly here. Some limitations, each assembly is unique. In other words, it's not a group. Moving an assembly in the project moves it in assembly views. So back in the 3D space here, if I move this to the side, we'll go back to our details and it's actually shifted. So just be aware that this is an important concept to understand, that these assemblies are essentially a blown up portion of the model and an isolated portion of the live model. Another downside for assemblies is it can be quite difficult to discern what you're editing. And I think you might have noticed that when I double clicked and clicked edit on it, it can be quite difficult to understand what's going on because everything goes green as a way of it being identified. As far as my research shows, I can't change that behavior. All right. how do we create one of these? Let's go ahead and have a look at our 3D model here. Now, where would why would you do one of these assemblies? So we've got sort of very bespoke sort of portions of a model that we might want to blow up. So, and really detail and thoroughly work out. And, this boxed out window is one of them. Very bespoke. It doesn't warrant building a family. For instance, there might be model in place. There might be system families. There might be parts of walls from the project that are all important. Here's another one of those examples. This is a very bespoke sort of railing with a sort of a breakfast bar, we'll call it, on top. And it's very unique to this space. An assembly is also useful because we have a railing in here. If we were to do this as a family, you wouldn't be able to have a railing inside the family itself. Okay, so let's go ahead and make one. So to create an assembly, it's just a matter of selecting the elements that you would like as part of the assembly, and then clicking the Create Assembly button at the top here. So it's right next to Group there, which you might not have noticed. It's just sitting there. Now, I'm just going to show you another limitation. Some categories cannot be part of assemblies. So I've selected this adjacent curtain wall. If I click Create Assembly, it's going to come up with an error, say they cannot be included. However, we can include not the curtain wall itself, but we can include, say, just all the bits. So if I just hold Control and I just go through and I select, say, panels and the railings, the mullions, we should say, of that system, then we can recreate that assembly, and it's okay. Now, when you're creating an assembly, it asks you what would you like to name it, and also what category, naming category, should it exist as part of. So we're going to call this the terrace balustrade. Now, the naming category, you don't necessarily just get free rein on that. It pretty much just picks, you can pick from one of the categories of the elements that you have selected. Now, this is a sort of a balustrade predominantly, so we're going to call it a railing. Click OK. The main thing for that is that it basically just means that it's sorted or shown in a different way. Okay, that has now created our assembly down here. It's called terrace balustrade. Now, to edit the assembly, you can select it, and now you have an Edit Assembly button. Clicking that will bring you into that view, which has the sort of the green transparency applied to it for all of the elements. If you'd like to add or remove elements from the assembly, just like a group, you can use these little tools here, and you can add or remove elements from the assembly like so. Okay. Finish. And if you no longer want it to be an assembly, there is the disassemble button, and that will obviously just drop the assembly. It will delete the assembly from the project browser, and any associated views that were created as part of doing that will also be deleted. So just be wary of that. Okay, one of the major benefits of assemblies is that you can create very quickly views associated with the elements. So to create assembly views, you select the assembly and then you click Create Views. I'll select that now. From here, you can tick on and off exactly what you want. So we've got 3D, we've got plans, sections, elevations, top, bottom, left, right, front, back. Just remembering that bottom might be a bit of an odd one for this particular element. Doesn't make much sense. Top as well might be okay, or versus plan. You've got to have, you're going to have to determine what makes most sense. Do you want to see all of the element, or do you want to see a cut through of the element? I'd say that all of the element would make more sense. So top is probably what should be selected for this. Let's go ahead and create a view for everything. You can also create schedules. of these elements contained within. Again, we'll just create everything. On the right here, you can then also select the associated view template and whether it gets assigned or not to the view. We've picked from our list the PR views, which is our project repository views. These seem to be most appropriate for what we're doing here, which is sort of a blow up of a particular component. And you can also create an associated sheet and pick what type of sheet that you want. So we'll just pick a title block here, generic, standard, and obviously your scale of what you want all of these views to be at. Let's click OK. Now down below here, I'll just expand it. We now have terrace balustrade and we have all of these views associated with it, as well as a sheet. So these views are already created. They can now just be dragged and dropped onto a page. And you can see why that's much faster than, let's just say, placing it in a view, a repository and elevating or creating sections and elevations of it. Also, these schedules. So we've got a schedule now for every type of element category that was part of the of the assembly, as well as a material takeoff there. So we've got parts list, we've got railing schedules, furniture schedules, etc. And just to highlight the difference between plan and top view, you can see that one has all of the elements and plan is, a plan view where it's been cut. It does have the features though to actually change the view range. So if you do want to crop it a bit, you can do so. All right. Now that sheet exists in its own right down below here within the assemblies area. So just to be wary that, it might not form necessarily part of your normal sheet list up the top, although it can be part of your standard drawing list. But it can have the same number. A101, for instance, will be A101 up here as well. In my preference, personally, I'd prefer just to use the sheets that are up here. Otherwise, these tend to get a little bit lost. So once you have created your sheet, you can place your elements on there like we have done here. You can assign them with viewports, titles. Then you can go through and dimension. And you can also do call outs and add detail to them like so. So this is just 2D elements overlaid of a call out, or this might just be a drafting view, which is a very typical element. In terms of scheduling and tagging, these can be tagged and scheduled just like any other element in Revit. If we go into a plan here, we've got our assembly that we've created here, terrace balustrade. We'll use the tag tool, TG, tag by category. We can pick that and we can balustrade, we'll call it 2. And if I select that, we can edit it and you can see that type mark has been inserted just the same as you would with any other element. So tagging is fairly similar to what you're probably used to. In terms of scheduling, you can use those generated schedules or you can do a new schedule of assemblies. So the differences there is that the schedules as part of the assembly are all about the assembly and its internal portions. An assembly schedule, on the other hand, is a list of all of the assemblies in your project. So we might go family and type just for this one, and maybe type mark, I'm not sure. We've got, there it is there, balustrade 2. So these are the assemblies that I have in this project. Shrouds, box window. I've got a sample terrace balustrade and that terrace balustrade. Okay. One thing to note with assemblies, if you do encounter a point where, you know, we do have multiple copies of this, and you can make multiple copies of it, provided they are identical, they will be the same, the same assembly. Now, I just got to make sure that I grab the curtain system here in order to copy it, because otherwise it won't have a host. If I select that one, that's called terrace balustrade, that's called terrace balustrade. But the moment I make an edit to one of them, delete that chair, okay, edits caused a new assembly type to be created. And now this one's called railings 006. Okay, so that's really important to note, just to highlight that they're not groups. Okay, it can be tagged independently though. Now, if you do make a copy of it and it is identical, and let's just say you've fully documented it, but then you realize, whoops, I actually want to make this one disappear and I want to use the views from another one, you can transfer the views. I'll just make a copy out to here of another one. Now, assembly views can only be associated with one instance of that type. So here we have the terrace balustrade. This one has all the views. So we go create views, and this one can create and have all the views. That's what these views down below, they're all pointing at this in the model. If I select this one, you'll notice that we can't create views. It is the same named type. You can't create views, and that's because these views, they only exist around one instance of the assembly. However, you can, let's call it, suck the views out of this one and insert them into this one, so you can acquire them. And that can be done only if it's an identical assembly. So we'll click acquire, and now this assembly can create the views instead. And this one is no longer associated with these. It could, for all intensive purposes, be deleted. Okay. However, doing so, we've actually moved the assembly, right? That will upset our sheet, and it will mean that the views will all be offset. So it's not as good as, say, having a project repository where you keep these elements often in their own space. Okay, some conclusions. Just to reiterate, assemblies do not replace families, and families should be used wherever possible. Assemblies are best used for providing extra information or clarity in and around areas of your project model. They usually comprise of, let's say, prefabricated elements or elements that belong to a similar, say, let's say, cluster or a system. It could be, in this case, a box window or a terrace balustrade, or it could be a screen system is a good one for this use, something that goes around your building that you really need to provide a little bit more clarity to in your documentation. So they're best for teasing apart live portions of your project model. And in terms of an assembly versus families versus project repository, use a family where you can. They're not mutually exclusive, obviously, but a project repository is still better for things that repeat. So assemblies are good for one-offs, but if we're going to be using this, let's say, box window, for instance, around the project, then you'd be looking to do that in a repository space, like a kitchen type or something like that.